The scent of rain-soaked concrete and blooming rhododendrons always reminded me of Portland and of the quiet life I'd built here, brick by methodical brick. My name is Reese Kalen, and at 38 I considered myself a man who understood patience. Not the passive kind, but the coiled, observant variety that notices patterns, anticipates moves, and waits for the perfect moment. I ran a small, specialized consultancy, helping businesses navigate complex regulatory landscapes, a job that demanded meticulous attention to detail and a keen eye for human behavior. It was a role I'd carved out for myself after a significant setback years ago, a wound that had healed but left a permanent, faint scar on my professional and social conscience. That scar had been etched by no less than Alina Vance, the mother of Heather Vance, a woman who now occupied an uncomfortably central position in the life of Anya, a friend of mine, or perhaps more accurately, an acquaintance I'd come to feel a profound protectiveness towards. Anya, at 24, shared a peculiar, strained history with Heather. They were half-sisters, born just 20 days apart, a testament to Anya's father's abrupt departure from her mother's life to build a new one with Alina. This familial fracture had cast a long, cold shadow, and Alina, a woman whose smile never quite reached her eyes, had always seemed to delight in widening it. My own encounter with Alina had been years before, in a different context, a professional gathering where I'd made the mistake of trusting a seemingly innocuous tip she'd offered. It had led to a misstep, a minor but strategically placed stumble that had cost me a significant contract and briefly tarnished my burgeoning reputation. I'd recovered, of course, thanks to my own resourcefulness, but the incident had opened my eyes to Alina's particular brand of manipulation, subtle, pervasive, and delivered with an air of innocent helpfulness. Since then, I'd watched her quietly from a distance, collecting anecdotes, connecting dots, like a vigilant, unseen archivist of her machinations. She operated like a spider, weaving invisible webs of influence, pulling threads others didn't even know existed. Anya, vibrant and earnest, was Alina's latest target. I'd seen it unfold over the past year, subtle digs disguised as concern, backhanded compliments that stung more than insults. Anya was planning her engagement party, a milestone that should have been bathed in pure joy. Instead, I could already sense the subtle tension radiating from her whenever Heather or Alina were mentioned. Anya had invited them, of course, out of a misguided sense of family duty and a desperate hope to maintain a semblance of peace with her father. I knew that feeling, the futile hope that a toxic dynamic could somehow be salvaged by enduring it. I watched, my jaw tight, as Anya described the casual formal theme, how she envisioned a relaxed, elegant evening, a celebration of love, not a battleground. But I knew Alina. I knew her drive to dominate, to control narratives, to ensure her daughter, Heather, always emerged victorious, or at least prominent. It was her signature. The slight against me had been small, almost forgettable to anyone else, but it was a pattern. A whisper in the right ear, a seemingly innocuous suggestion, a calculated oversight. It was all part of the same playbook. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, Anya's cousin, Clara, a nervous, excitable young woman who worked at a local boutique, called me. Clara often gossiped, and I, being observant, had long since learned to sift through the chatter for useful information. Today, her voice was a frantic whisper. "Reese, you won't believe what Heather's planning for Anya's party." I leaned back in my office chair, the hum of my computer a steady counterpoint to Clara's rising panic. "Tell me, Clara," I said, my voice calm, steady, designed to soothe and encourage disclosure. She described a dress, a picture Heather had shown off at the boutique, apparently hinting she was getting it specially tailored. Clara had seen the image on Heather's phone. It was Reese. It looked like a wedding dress, strapless, white, with crystals and gold accents, for an engagement party. Her voice was laced with outrage. "Who does that? What kind of twisted person would even think of it?" A cold certainty settled over me. This wasn't just Heather being competitive. This had Alina's fingerprints all over it. This was the spider's work, orchestrating a public humiliation designed to steal Anya's spotlight, to diminish her joy, to reassert their dominance. It was the exact same playbook, just on a grander stage. The same social slight scaled up, my own past humiliation, a phantom ache. This was more than just a dress, it was a declaration of war. My calm exterior belied the slow burn beginning deep within me. For years I had observed. Now an opportunity presented itself, not just for Anya, but for a quiet, patient man to finally address a historical wrong. This wasn't just about Anya's engagement party anymore. This was a chance to finally push back against a pattern of manipulation I had witnessed and been a victim of. I felt a surge of resolve. It was time for Alina Vance to finally understand the true cost of her games. The question now was how to strike without revealing my hand, how to turn her own weapon against her. I knew the audience listening to this story was likely feeling a similar sense of righteous indignation, and I promised them I would make it worth their while to keep listening. I ended the call with Clara, my mind already racing, plotting. My resourceful nature kicked in immediately. I needed to act, but subtly. This couldn't look like my doing. Anya needed to believe she was in control, that her idea was the solution. I needed to be the silent architect, the unseen ally. I considered the variables. Anya's family, particularly her mother's side, were known for their vivacious, uninhibited spirit, their love for celebration, their unironic embrace of silliness. This was a crucial piece of information, a potential lever. My patience had taught me to collect these details, to understand the dynamics of social groups. Elena, on the other hand, was rigid, concerned with appearances, with projecting an image of effortless superiority. Her weakness was her pride. The next day I arranged to meet Anya for coffee. She looked tired, a shadow under her eyes. "It's Heather," she sighed, stirring her latte. "My cousin Clara just told me the most ridiculous thing. Heather is planning to wear a wedding dress to our engagement party." Her voice was laced with a mixture of disbelief and growing fury. "A wedding dress, Reese, can you believe it?" I feigned shock, my expression mirroring hers, but inside a quiet satisfaction bloomed. Clara had done her part. Now my work began. "That's unprecedented, Anya," I said, choosing my words carefully. "Truly a bold choice." I paused, letting the implications sink in. "It's almost like she wants to make a statement, to ensure she's the center of attention, to overshadow your moment." Anya nodded, her jaw tight. "Exactly. It's her mom, Elena, putting her up to it. I know it. Elena always tries to belittle my mother and me. This is just another tactic." She took a shaky breath. "I don't know what to do. If I uninvite her, it'll cause a huge family drama with my father. If I let her come in that thing, I'll be fuming the entire night." This was my opening. "What if," I began, leaning forward, my voice dropping slightly conspiratorial, "you changed the narrative? What if her statement became utterly ridiculous, completely disarmed?" I watched her face, seeing the flicker of curiosity, the slight lift of hope. This was the promise of a payoff, the immediate hook I needed to keep her engaged, to pull her into my plan disguised as hers. Anya looked at me, perplexed. "How? What do you mean?" "Think about it, Anya," I suggested, my tone even, reflective. "Elena and Heather thrive on conventional expectations. They want to shock by violating them. What if you violated all of them? What if the conventional context of casual formal simply ceased to exist?" I paused again, letting her resourceful mind chew on the idea. This was the patient part, guiding, not dictating. My own past experience of being manipulated taught me how to subtly manipulate in return, to nudge events in a desired direction without leaving a trace. Her eyes widened. "Anya's mom's side of the family is crazy for Halloween," she murmured, almost to herself. "They'd go all out." Her lips curved into a slow, dangerous smile. "A costume party." "Precisely," I affirmed, a quiet triumph in my voice. "Imagine Heather in her opulent wedding gown and everyone else not. The more elaborate and outlandish the other costumes, the more out of place she'd look. Her statement would be reduced to a punchline. She wouldn't be stealing your spotlight. She'd be the unintended clown." My heart gave a satisfying thrum. This wasn't just about Anya. It was about the years Elena Vance had spent building her house of cards, brick by manipulative brick. It was about to get a rather strong gust of wind. Subscribe to Tales of Revenge channel for new revenge stories daily. We spent the next hour brainstorming. Anya's excitement was palpable. She rattled off ideas, her mother and aunts as Abba, her fiancé as Bubbles, herself as Mojo Jojo. The more ridiculous, the better. She loved the idea of providing fun hats and cheap wigs for guests who couldn't manage a full costume. It perfectly fit her family's quirky, inclusive spirit. This was Anya reclaiming her narrative, and I was merely a strategic whisper in her ear, ensuring every detail worked against Elena's predictable machinations. The initial emotional state of empathy and intrigue for the audience was now progressing to anticipation. What would happen when Heather and Elena showed up? And what was Reese truly planning beyond this immediate revenge? That question, like a silent undercurrent, promised a deeper payoff. The next few days were a flurry of quiet activity. Anya started texting guests about the change of plans, her messages infused with a playful urgency. "Costume party, go wild!" Her mother's side, as anticipated, responded with unbridled enthusiasm, already planning elaborate outfits. Anya even managed to get a few of her fiancé's more reserved friends to commit to at least a funny hat. My observations of her family dynamics were paying off. The challenge, as we knew, was ensuring Heather and Elena received the message. Anya, knowing her father's tendency to defer to Elena and to conveniently forget inconvenient truths, decided to text him directly, asking him to relay the change to Heather and her mother. It was a perfect trap. We both knew he'd either forget entirely or deliver the message at the last possible second, perhaps even omit the crucial costume detail, hoping to avoid conflict with Alina. This was a classic Alina move, using the father as an unwitting pawn, and we were turning that very pawn against her. This was the careful progression of the plan, building layer by layer. I spent my evenings researching Alina Vance. My old, quiet obsession had a renewed purpose. She was involved in various local charity boards, a pillar of the community, but always with a calculated public image. Her business ventures were always just on the edge of aggressive, never overtly illegal, but certainly morally ambiguous. I remembered the details of my own professional setback. The tip she'd given me, which turned out to be a cleverly disguised piece of misinformation that led me down a blind alley, allowing her favored client to swoop in and secure a lucrative deal I was close to finalizing. It wasn't illegal, just unethical, a perfectly executed social slight that had the force of a professional torpedo. I hadn't forgot. My resourcefulness was now dedicated to finding her weaknesses, the chinks in her perfectly polished armor. I learned about her charity affiliations, her financial investments, and even the minor controversies that had, up to now, always been expertly swept under the rug. I was collecting more than just anecdotes. I was building a dossier. The night of the engagement party arrived, bathed in the soft glow of Portland's city lights. My own costume was simple but effective. I'd gone as a detective from a classic noir film, trench coat, fedora, a perpetually observant expression. It felt appropriate. The air buzzed with laughter and excited chatter. Guests streamed in, a kaleidoscope of characters, superheroes mingling with historical figures, pirates clinking glasses with cartoon characters. The sheer joy in the room was palpable, a stark contrast to the simmering tension I knew would soon arrive. This was Anya's moment, reclaimed, vibrant, authentic. Anya, as Mojo Jojo, looked both hilarious and radiant, her eyes sparkling with a mischievous glee I hadn't seen in her for weeks. Her fiancé, Bubbles, perfectly complimented her, a giant, smiling green blob of a man. Her mother, channeling her inner Agnetha, belted out an impromptu rendition of Dancing Queen with her sisters. The atmosphere was exactly what Anya had envisioned, and more. It filled me with a quiet satisfaction, knowing I had played a part in restoring her happiness, however small. Then, about an hour late, the grand entrance. The party quieted slightly, a collective intake of breath. The door opened, and there they were, Heather in an undeniably opulent, floor-length white gown, glittering with crystals and gold accents, a strapless confection that screamed bride. Beside her, Alina, regal and disapproving in a perfectly tailored, sober pantsuit, and Anya's father, looking thoroughly uncomfortable in a smart blazer. They scanned the room, their expressions slowly shifting from expectant superiority to utter bewilderment, then to dawning horror. Heather's face, initially a mask of smug anticipation, began to crumple. She saw Luffy chatting with Jesus, Zorro debating with Ian Malcolm, and a whole table of guests sporting ridiculous hats and brightly colored wigs. She saw Anya beaming, dressed as Mojo Jojo. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She hadn't just been outsmarted, she had been made into a spectacle. Her grand entrance, her carefully planned public humiliation of Anya had backfired spectacularly, transforming her into the unwitting star of a very different, very humiliating show. Anya's fiancé, bless his heart, walked right up to Heather, a wide, genuine smile on his Bubbles face. "Heather!" boomed, his voice full of mock admiration. "Your bride dress looks amazing for a cheap costume. Seriously, that's incredible dedication." The words, delivered with such innocent enthusiasm, were a perfect barb, precisely aimed, and they landed with devastating accuracy. Heather let out a small, strangled sound. Her face flushed a furious red, her eyes welling up. Alina's perfect composure cracked, a scowl deepening the lines around her mouth. Anya's father shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. The air crackled with suppressed laughter from the other guests, a few of whom openly snickered. The silence, stretched taut, was punctuated only by the occasional jingle of a plastic lei or the rustle of a superhero cape. Then Heather broke. She let out a frustrated sob, turned on her heel, and practically ran from the room, her elaborate white gown swishing behind her like a deflated cloud. Alina, her face a mask of barely contained fury, marched over to Anya. "Anya, how could you? You are being childish. Why didn't you tell Heather yourself about this farce? And task your father, you know he's busy." Her voice was a low, venomous hiss, barely audible over the sudden buzz of conversation that erupted as soon as Heather fled. Anya, standing tall and confident in her Mojo Jojo costume, met Alina's gaze unflinchingly. "I did, Alina. I texted Dad. I explicitly asked him to relay the message. Perhaps he forgot." She put a pointed emphasis on the word. a subtle nod to her father's complicity, or perhaps Eleanor's deliberate oversight. Anya's father winced, truly caught in the middle. The emotional state of outrage was building. The audience, now fully invested, wanted to see not just the immediate humiliation, but the deeper consequence for Eleanor. This was a significant payoff, but I knew, as Reese, that it was only the beginning. This was simply a battle won, not the war. Eleanor, her face pinched with anger, snapped a terse command to Anya's father, then turned and stalked out, following Heather. Anya's father, looking defeated, offered a mumbled apology to Anya before shuffling out after them. As the door clicked shut behind them, a wave of cheers erupted from the guests. The party, momentarily paused, roared back to life with renewed vigor, the air thick with triumph and camaraderie. Anya found my gaze across the room and gave me a subtle nod, a silent acknowledgement of my strategic input. The satisfaction was profound but not complete. I watched Anya laugh genuinely, freely, for the first time in weeks. It was a good feeling, seeing her reclaim her joy, but as I observed Eleanor's retreating back, I knew this wasn't enough. This was a public humiliation, yes, but it wasn't a lasting blow to Eleanor Vance. She was too resilient, too cunning, too deeply rooted in her manipulative ways. She would rationalize it, deflect it, spin it into another grievance against Anya and her mother. My own past wound, the one inflicted by Eleanor's precise, surgical manipulation, throbbed anew. The costume party was a skirmish, a single battle won. The real war, the one for true justice, for genuine vindication against a lifetime of Eleanor's calculated cruelty, was yet to be fought. My role as Anya's ally was done for now, but my personal mission was just beginning. My rock bottom wasn't Anya's rock bottom. It was the realization that Eleanor Vance, the architect of my own professional setback years ago, had gotten away with her schemes for too long. Watching her storm out, her rage pure and undiluted, I saw not just a humiliated woman, but a predator who had merely been momentarily inconvenienced. The minor social slight she had orchestrated against me, the seemingly innocent tip that had subtly but effectively sabotaged my career trajectory years ago, felt like a burning coal in my chest. It wasn't about money or fame. It was about dignity, about the silent, insidious erosion of trust she left in her wake. This costume party, while brilliant, was a mere slap on the wrist for a woman who deserved a far more profound reckoning. My mind, naturally observant, had spent years cataloging Eleanor's patterns. I'd seen the way she charmed, disarmed, then subtly undermined. I'd seen her network of associates, her preferred methods of leveraging influence, her almost pathological need for control and superiority. She moved through Portland's professional and social circles like a ghost, leaving no tangible trace of her machinations, only the ruins of others' aspiration. This realization, this profound certainty that the costume party was merely a fleeting victory, pushed me beyond my usual boundaries. It wasn't about anger anymore. It was about an unwavering resolve to expose the truth, to finally bring down the woman who operated with such impunity. This was the moment my patient, resourceful, and observant traits coalesced into a single, unyielding purpose. The rock bottom for me was recognizing that my own silent suffering had to end, and the only way to do that was to ensure Eleanor Vance could never orchestrate such pain again, for anyone. The days following the engagement party were filled with Anya's happy recounting of the event, her joy infectious. But for me, the quiet hum of purpose had intensified into a focused roar. I spent my mornings at my consultancy, seemingly absorbed in regulatory details, but my evenings and early mornings were dedicated to Eleanor Vance. I delved deeper into her professional life. My observant trait meant I had long paid attention to the seemingly trivial, a throwaway comment at a networking event, a name dropped in conversation, a particular legal firm she always seemed to use. Now, these disparate threads began to weave into a tapestry of her financial dealing. I started with public records, cross-referencing her charity board memberships with the organizations she recommended for corporate donations. It was all legal on the surface, but the flow of funds often seemed to lead back indirectly to businesses with which she or her family had undisclosed connections. My resourceful trait kicked in. I leveraged my professional network quietly, carefully, asking innocuous questions, gathering information that would never raise an eyebrow. A former colleague who specialized in corporate forensics, a junior analyst at a local bank who owed me a favor from a prior, unrelated consultation. I reached out to them not for anything illegal, but for insights into complex financial structures, for patterns in investment, for details about shell companies often used in her kind of business. I learned that Alina had been involved in a series of property acquisitions a decade ago, just as Portland's real estate market was beginning its meteoric ascent. She had, through a series of intermediaries, purchased several undervalued properties in up-and-coming neighborhoods. My setback had occurred around the same time, when I was negotiating a contract for a tech startup looking to secure office space in one of those very neighborhoods. Elina's tip had directed me towards a property that was, unbeknownst to me, slated for major infrastructure delays, while her client secured the prime spot. It was a classic misdirection, seemingly helpful, devastatingly effective. Now I focused on those properties. My patience was a weapon. I spent weeks meticulously examining land deeds, zoning changes, and obscure municipal permits. I noticed a consistent pattern. Properties were purchased under holding companies, often incorporated out of state, then rapidly sold for significant profit. Nothing inherently wrong with that. But then I noticed another detail, a thread that led to a very specific minor code violation that had been quietly overlooked on one of the larger, more lucrative developments. It was small, a seemingly insignificant deviation from the city's complex environmental regulations, but it was enough to trigger hefty fines and, more importantly, a review of all properties developed by the same group. And that group, I discovered, had Alina Vance's fingerprints all over it, through a web of silent partnerships and indirect investments. This wasn't about a single property. This was about a pattern of cutting corners, leveraging obscure loopholes, and relying on her influence to skirt regulations, all while maintaining her impeccable public image. The code violation on that one property, if brought to light, wouldn't just be a fine. It would trigger a cascade. It would force a deeper audit of all the related developments, which would then expose the true extent of her shadowy financial network, how she benefited from developments that were built on shaky legal grounds, sometimes at the expense of local communities or environmental standards. This was the key. This was the true revenge, not just public humiliation, but a dismantling of her carefully constructed empire of influence and ill-gotten gains. I needed to be precise. A direct accusation would be dismissed. I needed irrefutable proof, and I needed to release it in a way that couldn't be contained. My thoughts turned to the local investigative journalism scene. Portland had a few tenacious independent reporters, less concerned with corporate pressure, more with genuine public interest. I began discreetly feeding anonymous tips, vague enough not to be traceable, but potent enough to pique a journalist's interest. A murmur about unusual patterns in recent property development permits. A whisper about environmental waivers that seem unusually convenient. I never named Alina directly, only hinted at certain influential figures or well-connected individuals. This was the careful, slow-burn approach, allowing the seeds of suspicion to germinate naturally. The emotional toll of this meticulous work was significant. I found myself thinking about Alina constantly, dissecting her motives, anticipating her reactions. The line between righteous justice and consuming obsession blurred at times. There were nights I barely slept, spreadsheets and property records swimming before my eyes. My patient trait was stretched to its limit, but my resourceful and observant natures drove me forward. I knew what I was building, brick by painstaking brick, was not just a legal case, but a social and professional detonation. The first hint of success came 3 months after Anya's engagement party. A small article appeared in a local independent paper, buried on an inside page. Questions arise over downtown riverfront development permits. No names were mentioned, but the description of the project and the vague hints about environmental oversight were unmistakably linked to one of Alina's key investments. I felt a surge of exhilaration mixed with a chilling resolve. The hook was set. Now I just had to reel her in, slowly, surely. This was the beginning of the end for Alina Vance. Subscribe to Tales of Revenge channel for new revenge stories daily. The article was a tremor, not an earthquake, but I knew Alina would feel it. Her network would immediately identify the project, and she would undoubtedly move to quash any further investigation. This was part of my plan. I wanted her to react, to expose her fear, to dig herself deeper. My next move involved a carefully curated data dump. Not directly to the press, but to a watchdog organization I knew shared information with investigative journalists. The data was encrypted, requiring a key that would only be made public at a later, strategically chosen date. It contained irrefutable evidence of the zoning violations, the environmental shortcuts, and the complex web of shell companies Alina used to obscure her involvement. I spent weeks perfecting the timing, waiting for a moment when Alina Vance would be at her most vulnerable, her public image at its most polished. That moment arrived with the announcement of the annual Portland Philanthropic Gala, an event she chaired every year, a glittering showcase of her influence and her meticulously cultivated persona as a civic leader. She was even slated to receive a Lifetime Achievement in Community Service award. The irony was almost too delicious. This was my grand stage, the culmination of years of observation and months of meticulous planning. The night of the gala, the city's elite gathered at the historic Sentinel Hotel ballroom. Elena, radiant in a sapphire blue gown, held court, accepting accolades, her smile wider than I had ever seen it. I was there, a quiet observer among the throng, just another face in the crowd. My role wasn't to be seen, but to orchestrate. As the dessert course was being served, and Elena prepared to go on stage for her award, the pre-programmed email went out. The encrypted key was released to the public, unlocking the data dump. Simultaneously, anonymous calls were made to news desks, urging them to check their inboxes for an urgent and unverified lead regarding local philanthropy and questionable property deals. The immediate effect was subtle. A few phones buzzed. Reporters, always tethered to their devices, began to tap and swipe, their faces shifting from polite boredom to focused intensity. Whispers started in small clusters. Elena, oblivious, rose to approach the podium, bathed in the flattering glow of the spotlights. The gala's host, a local news anchor known for his affable demeanor, began his introduction. And now, ladies and gentlemen, a truly remarkable individual, a guiding light in our community, a woman whose dedication to Portland's betterment knows no bounds. Just as he spoke her name, Elena Vance, a wave of digital revelation crashed over the ballroom. Phones lit up with breaking news alerts. Attendees, moments before rapt with admiration, began to exchange bewildered glances, then open stares. The elegant facade of the evening began to crack. On the large screens flanking the stage, meant to project Elena's image, a different kind of image started to appear. Not the official gala branding, but a scrolling text from a news website, flashing headlines about a massive zoning violation scandal and undeclared financial interests in multiple downtown developments. My resourceful trait had extended to identifying a disgruntled, underpaid AV technician who was open to a distraction for a generous, untraceable cash payment. Elena, her hand already reaching for the award, froze. Her practiced smile faltered, her eyes darting to the screens, then to the horrified faces in the crowd. The host, seeing the chaos unfold, stammered, unsure how to proceed. The articles, now widely accessible, detailed the environmental shortcuts, the hidden holding companies, the systematic circumvention of regulations, all meticulously linked to Elena Vance's silent partnership. It highlighted the property that had been the subject of my own past sabotage, exposing how she had profited from a development that now faced massive fines and potential demolition due to her deliberate cutting of corners. It wasn't just a violation, it was a betrayal of public trust, jeopardizing local ecosystems and communities for personal gain. My long game, my patient accumulation of details, had paid off. A collective gasp swept through the room. Elena's face, moments before triumphant, was now a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving her porcelain pale. Her hand dropped from the award. The host, regaining some composure, nervously announced an unexpected technical difficulty, but it was too late. The dam had burst. Reporters, now emboldened, began shouting questions. "Ms. Vance, can you comment on these allegations? Are you connected to the shell companies mentioned in the report? What about the environmental violations on the Riverbend project?" Elena tried to regain her composure, her voice tight with forced indignation. This is a malicious attack, a baseless smear campaign." But her words lacked conviction, drowned out by the rising clamor. The image of the impeccable civic leader shattered, revealing the calculating opportunist beneath. My observant eyes caught the moment a prominent board member, a key associate of Elena's, quietly slipped away from the table, signaling the beginning of her professional isolation. Her carefully cultivated reputation, her social standing, the very things she valued most, were crumbling before her eyes in the most public and humiliating way possible. This wasn't just a costume party. This was a complete, calculated demolition. The emotional state of triumph and satisfaction was washing over me, a clean, cold wave. In the ensuing weeks, the fallout was catastrophic for Elena Vance. Investigations were launched, her charity board memberships were revoked, her business dealings scrutinized. The articles proliferated, each new revelation peeling back another layer of her deception. Lawsuits began to pile up from investors who felt misled, from environmental groups, from the city itself. Heather's mother, once a formidable presence, became a pariah. Her world, built on manipulation and hidden advantage, collapsed under the weight of transparent truth. She tried to fight back, of course, issuing denials, threatening lawsuits, but the evidence I had meticulously gathered was irrefutable. She had no ground to stand on. Anya's father, caught in the crossfire, finally saw Elena for who she truly was. He apologized profusely to Anya, a genuine apology this time, filled with regret and a dawning realization of the years he'd spent under Elena's spell. Their relationship, long strained, began a slow, hesitant process of repair. Heather, her own life now tainted by her mother's disgrace, retreated from public view, her attempts to one-up Anya paling in comparison to her family's very public downfall. For me, the resolution was profound. The scar from Elena's past manipulation began to fade, not just metaphorically, but emotionally. The vindication wasn't a triumphant roar, but a quiet, deep sense of peace. I hadn't sought to destroy her completely, but to dismantle her ability to harm others, to expose the truth of her methods. I had done that. My personal mission was complete. I reflected on the journey. The initial anger, the methodical planning, the careful execution. It wasn't about vengeance for vengeance's sake. It was about balance, about ensuring that actions, however subtle, had consequences. True justice wasn't always about retribution. Sometimes it was about revealing what had always been hidden, allowing the truth to do its work. And the final twist. Years later, while reviewing some old municipal records for a client, I stumbled upon a curious detail regarding that property that had been the original source of my professional setback. The environmental violations Elena had committed, the ones that triggered her downfall, had been far more severe than even I, in my meticulous investigation, had realized. They hadn't just caused fines. They had led to irreversible contamination of a small, forgotten patch of wetlands bordering the property. A quiet, vital ecosystem that had been slowly dying because of her shortcuts. My revenge hadn't just exposed her, it had unknowingly stopped a slow ecological disaster, preventing even greater harm. My patient, observant nature had, in the end, brought about a reckoning far greater and far more meaningful than I had ever intended. Sometimes the threads of injustice weave a tangled web, and it takes someone willing to patiently untangle them, thread by painstaking thread, to truly set things right. The story of revenge, of justice, is never truly simple, but it always demands to be told. Subscribe to Tales of Revenge channel for new revenge stories daily.